Sure.
That's not a bad
Not bad.
I don't know what happened. Oh, no, I think this is good.
Already?
And then they have the screen. Pardon?
That's not good. Is it? Oh, yeah, sorry, there's another name here.
We switched.
Oh.
Do you want to say my talking points and then you say my talking points? Emilie.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Who are you with? I'm with the. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I took it off with the.
It was too hot.
No, but also like the. Doesn't match my earrings. No,
It's very warm here. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think I'm your adaptation token person.
Okay. I'm just the policy guy.
Nice.
Whatever that means.
Whatever that means, yes. I'm even worse. I'm adaptation indicators, adaptation monitoring evaluation.
Oh.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this press conference organized by REN21. My name is Mariana Castaño-Cano. It's a pleasure to be the moderator of this press conference. The title of the press conference is From Mitigation to Adaptation, Renewables for Economic, Social, and Climate Resilience. We are very used to hear about renewables in the framework of mitigating greenhouse gas emission, but renewables are more than just a mitigation tool. In the face of climate shocks and as impacts, climate disasters intensify, renewable energies are increasingly becoming a safety net. They are recognized for its value for adaptation. They play a critical role in saving lives and livelihoods before, during, and after extreme weather events. And I am joined today by a distinguished panel of experts. By order, Rana Adib, REN21 Executive Director, Dr. James Fletcher, Caribbean Climate Community from the Climate Envoy for the CARICOM, Emilie Beauchamp. Emilie Beauchamp, she is the lead for adaptation, monitoring, evaluation and learning at the International Institute for Sustainable Development, IISD. Claudio Forner is head of climate policy at Climate Analytics. And last but not least, Katie Jetnil-Kijiner. Katie is the climate envoy at the Ministry of Environment of the Republic of the Marshall Islands. And without further ado, I'll give the floor to Rana Adib.
Thank you so much, Mariana. A very warm welcome from my side too. So very quickly about REN21, we're a network of governments, industry, NGOs, science academia, and members at large dedicated to building the renewable-based economy for strong, resilient, and prosperous societies. We're working together to provide knowledge, bring players together, and really change the norms and the governing principles of our energy systems, but also the economy and society towards renewables. So the message here is very clear. Renewable energy does deliver climate adaptation and not just mitigation. How does it do it? First of all, there is a very clear reduction of the dependence on fossil fuel supply. And this means also reducing the vulnerability to supply chain disruptions and vulnerable markets. Renewables are available everywhere and rely on established technologies. That's the first part. The other part, however, also is that renewable energy provides diversified and decentralized energy services, and renewable-based systems keep essential services like communication, and clearly in climate shocks, the communication is fundamental here. Drinking water, cold chains, transport, and health facilities running during and after climate shocks. from solar-powered irrigation and cold storage to microgrids for desalination. It's very clear that renewable provide concrete tools for adapting to drought, floods, and extreme weather. And for instance, in Jamaica, we have just seen that houses with renewable energy were the first ones to re-establish their energy services. REN21 has analyzed the national action plans and NDCs submitted until September. And what is interesting to recognize is that we already see many countries are already recognizing that renewables is an adaptation solution. And developing countries are leading here. 3/4 of the countries with a NAP and third NDCs already recognize basically the role of renewables, 83 out of 113, and 72 of these are developing countries. What is also interesting is to see the link basically to the vulnerable, or to the energy sectors. Climate vulnerable countries are clearly in the lead. And then when we look at the diversification benefits, this is something that is recognized by 15 countries, for instance. So diversifying the energy source is another way of bringing resilience. Now, in the link to the energy sectors, 7 countries mention renewables in the context of the water sector, all being developing countries. Renewables for health services is mentioned by 9 countries. Sorry. 9 countries do mention renewables for agricultural resilience. For instance, through solar-powered irrigation, an example is, for instance, the example of Nepal. To harness basically the full potential of renewables, however, and I think this is very clearly a call to decision makers today, is the renewable energy solutions need to be built to high quality standards, resilient infrastructure, climate resilience infrastructure. And moving forward, COP30 must make renewable energy for adaptation visible. That's the first step. Countries really need to integrate renewables into their national adaptation and development strategies. And this will also help to unlock finance and improve tracking. And a part of this, it's very clear that renewable energy for specific socioeconomic and adaptation indicators need to be developed and progress needs to be tracked because you only manage what you can measure. Moving forward, a community of practice is really important to establish because we realize that renewable energy historically is more seen as a mitigation solution and adaptation is very clearly cross-cutting, energy is cross-cutting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rana. And you are invited to visit the REN21 website. You have an updated Intel brief with all the evidence, all the data, some of which Rana just mentioned. And now I'm going to move to the extreme left of the table, Katie. We heard the reasons why investing in renewables is investing in adaptation and resilience. Please, could you give concrete examples from the region and the Marshall Islands specifically on how renewables are helping save lives and livelihoods?
Sure. Thank you for that, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. I'm grateful to be here. So for us in the Marshall Islands, we definitely see renewable energy as a part of tackling a vulnerability, a key vulnerability, and it's tackling vulnerability and that's what adaptation is all about. So adaptation is addressing the vulnerability of the island and its needs, and the energy sector is definitely one of our more vulnerable sectors. So a key example of that is that when the new administration first began, just about 2 years ago, they had just been inaugurated and there was rolling blackouts for almost 2 weeks. We were having blackouts that lasted over a day, sometimes 2 days, and it led to all of these other disasters happening at the same time. Our Wi-Fi went down, there was water and sanitation services that were impacted. And then at the same time that we were having rolling blackouts in the capital city, there was 4 other atolls that were experiencing inundations, flooding across the islands that were destroying their crops, their home gardens, and then they were impacting the schools and the runways. And at the same time that was happening, there was like 2 other atolls that were experiencing droughts. So all of that to say that, you know, I think not having a secure source of energy compounds our risks of disasters and makes addressing climate change even harder. Beyond this, I can also say that for the energy sector, the rollout of renewables isn't just our preferred option, but it's our most practical solution. So even if the Marshall Islands wanted to expand diesel-based generation, the logistics required to establish, operate, maintain, and fuel these systems across our islands is virtually impossible, because you have to also take into account that there are 29 atolls around the Marshall Islands, and there is an unreliable transportation between those atolls. So, you know, ensuring that we have home-based solar powers, solarization is really the most viable pathway for us, because it's clean, it's affordable, and it's also easier to deploy and transport across all of our different atolls. And the funds that would otherwise be spent on imported diesel can instead be directed towards our most pressing adaptation needs. So I do see, you know, I think it's kind of interesting to see mitigation and adaptation as 2 very different sectors, but for us, renewable energy is energy security for adaptation, and it's a part of our planning and process that needs to be prioritized. The other thing, last thing I want to mention is also that we're very prone to price shocks when there are disasters around the world, and our gas and our diesel can be way too expensive, and it can skyrocket because of changing geopolitics and things that are at play beyond what's happening in our nation. And so having renewable energy that is just a constant source that is there in our islands is more reliable as well, and not just because of being able to access it, but also because of price. So just thank you for that. So I think that's all. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll have the occasion for question at the end. Now let's move to the Caribbean, that was recently, unfortunately, hit by Hurricane Melissa, with the devastation that we all saw. Jimmy, I would like to ask, what should happen from the policy and finance perspective? So this is the COP where we are hearing a lot about both topics, finance and adaptation. What needs to happen?
Thank you. I think we often talk about solar panels, as our friend from RMI just said. We often talk about solar panels and wind turbines as tools to cut emissions. But in the Caribbean, where combined the countries contribute less than 0.2% of global greenhouse gas emissions, as much as we are very committed to decarbonizing our societies, decarbonizing our economies, and really playing our part to ensure that we are on track for 1.5 degrees Celsius, that really is not the driving force behind transitioning. It really is the economic value, and also something that very few people pay attention to, the adaptation and resilience value. So from where I sit, the renewables are an important line of defense when the lights go out, when the strong winds come, and when the hurricane touches down, and when communities are trying to recover in the days and weeks that follow, as we've just seen in Jamaica with the devastation caused by Hurricane Melissa, which at last count, I think the loss and damage is accounting for something like 1/3 of the GDP of that country. So for us, renewables are no longer just a mitigation option. They are part of our resilience infrastructure. So I think when we talk about what are some of the things that need to happen, we have to understand that, one, this is not just a climate argument, it's an economic and a social one. And I think REN 21's assessment shows very clearly how much mitigation is factoring in the national adaptation plans, how much use of renewables is factoring in the national adaptation plans. And the important thing is that many of the climate vulnerable countries are leading the way, again, going from the work that was done by REN 21. In the Caribbean, this is reflected in solar-powered water systems that will continue operating after storms, in schools and clinics with rooftop solar and batteries that allow for minimal interruption to education and critical health services. So really, the story is that not so much that we are behind, but we are innovating. And unfortunately, we're innovating with totally inadequate finance. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to do something about that finance gap, which really is the core of your question. And the adaptation finance for renewable energy is minimal, despite its proven role in keeping essential systems running during crises. Too often, we treat distributed solar and storage and microgrids as mitigation projects, and we finance them as if they're optional climate extras. And I think that's the first thing that needs to change. We have to change the way in which we think of transitioning, we think of moving from fossil fuel powered systems to solar systems. So I think we really need three things at this COP. One, recognition in the new finance architecture that we explicitly recognize renewable-based adaptation as a priority area. Adaptation windows in multilateral funds, like the Green Climate Fund and others, should treat decentralized renewables for essential services as core adaptation and not as a sideline mitigation co-benefit. Secondly, we need the right type of finance. Climate vulnerable countries cannot be expected to borrow at commercial rates to keep hospitals running and drinking water flowing after climate disasters that they did not cause. Unfortunately, that is our reality. Many of these countries are blamed or criticized for having high debt to GDP ratios, but when you drill down behind that debt, you see a lot of that debt has been accumulated by governments having to borrow every single time there's a hurricane, every single time there's an extreme weather event, and sometimes extreme weather events that are not sexy, do not make the international news, but cause significant damage, like flooding, like heavy winds that may not register at 100 miles an hour, but cause significant damage. So every time we have one of these events, there is significant borrowing that has to take place. Much has been made, using Jamaica as an example, much has been made over the fact that the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility has made a almost $92 million payout to Jamaica. And Jamaica had the wisdom to invest in a catastrophe bond that will pay out $150 million to Jamaica. So that's $240 million. Sounds like a lot of money on the surface. But if, as has been reported, the loss and damage in Jamaica is 1/3 of its GDP, we're talking about somewhere in the vicinity of $8 billion. So what they're getting is nowhere near what they need. So renewables have to be seen that way. And I think also we need to understand that, sorry, I just lost my trend. Yes, and finally, there must be a link to loss and damage. The emerging architecture for responding to loss and damage, including the fund for responding to loss and damage, should see investment in renewables for adaptation as a first line of cost-effective risk reduction. Every clinic with solar and storage, every resilient microgrid, every solar-powered water system is one less item on the loss and damage invoice in the next disaster. So I think it's really changing how we think, changing how we view mitigation, and changing how we respond where finance and policy are concerned.
Thank you very much, Jimmy. Now let's hear from Emilie. Emilie, who, by the way, is lead author of IPCC Working Group 2. So Emilie knows a lot about that. And I would like to, Emilie, ask you, you're following the negotiations on adaptation. We heard what should happen at COP30 in the process, how that can happen, based on evidence. How can the process integrate renewables for adaptation based on evidence?
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And just to correct, I'm a lead author, not the whole lead. Yes, that would be another job entirely. But yeah, thank you so much and good afternoon. And as the lead also for monitoring, evaluation and learning for resilience at the International Institute for Sustainable Development, or IISD, I want to talk a bit about an area where we see real promise, but also real gaps when it comes to assessing progress or to looking at progress on adaptation. And it's also focused on this COP. And this is how to improve assessment and improve the evidence for diverse adaptation solutions through better monitoring, evaluation, and learning, or MEL, for adaptation. So, for example, there's little evidence that shines through systematically on the role of renewable energy in climate adaptation. They're both a mitigation and an adaptation solution, as been shown very well by the panel. And they're gaining prominence, particularly for developing countries, which face the highest climate impacts despite contributing the least to problems. But to scale up solutions and to be better recognized, we need evidence. That always helps. So from our work at IISD and at the National Adaptation Plan Global Network, we can see that renewables are already part of national adaptation plans and sectoral strategies. This is especially the case, and very well shown by the two esteemed colleagues on the panel, in small island development states, such as the Marshall Islands, Kiribati, Antigua and Barbuda. And we can already see this in their plans. Just last month, I shared, as Hurricane Melissa struck Jamaica, houses fitted with solar panels were able to maintain power throughout the event. And the thing is that this is not incidental stories or data points. To demonstrate how renewable energy helps communities to withstand and recover from extreme events. Ultimately, when you think about the current COP and global policy, we say that this ultimately helps to achieve the global goal on adaptation that is established in the Paris Agreement. So research at IISD across energy and climate resilience highlight that the contributions of renewable energy are still not consistently visible. Countries are investing in these solutions, but the global and the national monitoring, evaluation, and learning systems are not fully capturing the scale of their impact. So as a result, an important part of adaptation progress is going unrecognized or not fully recognized. So how does this fit with the current global frameworks and policy discussions? Well, improving national MEL frameworks by 2030 is one of the 11 targets under the UAE framework for global climate resilience. In other words, that's the framework that guides how we assess the progress on the global goal on adaptation under the Paris Agreement. But MEL systems and evidence systems are often underfunded and understaffed. So there's a critical need to improve financing of adaptation and of the disaggregated and inclusive MEL systems that allow to track, assess, and learn about what works, how and for whom, when it comes to adaptation. And this includes capturing key actions that provide co-benefits like renewable energy. In the midst of COP30, which discusses global adaptation indicators and the future global stocktake, there's a clear opportunity to improve on MEL and evidence systems in countries and through other initiatives. As we move in the next cycles of national adaptation plans and the next global stocktake, it's critical that assessments of adaptation better account for diversified adaptation solutions out there, such as the value of renewable energy, so that countries' efforts are fully reflected. And for the related needs in adaptations to be also captured, so that's really important. This will allow us to tell more accurate and comprehensive stories of national efforts and provide the evidence that decision makers need to scale solutions that deliver both resilience and mitigation and their synergies.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Emilie. And now let's move to Claudio. It's clear we need an energy transition, but we need to climate-proof that energy transition. Climate risk assessment, how fundamental is it?
Thank you, and thanks to Renton to having us here. So I'm Claudio Forner. I work for Climate Analytics. We are a small think tank, and we're committed to provide science on how to achieve the Paris goal. That's our focus. Part of the work that we do is provide evidence on how to develop 1.5 compatible energy systems, which, of course, no surprise, they are heavily renewable, if not 100% renewable. Well, we all know this is no news that global warming has significant implications for the planning of the energy transition, right? Rising temperatures, for example, increase the demand of energy, for example, because temperatures are rising, then there's more demand for cooling, or also less demand because of heating. At the same time, the impacts of climate change limit the potential of some areas or where you can have how much renewables, for example, you can have in different areas. So we knew this, but we're starting to realize how important climate risk considerations are for when you're planning energy systems. And I have a specific example here. We're now providing for a number of countries evidence on how the energy systems has to change through time to be 1.5 compatible. And in the case of Brazil, Brazil is heavily renewable. Our models suggest that it must, to be 1.5 renewable, it must reach 99% renewable by 2030. Now, our models, when we run the machinery, the algorithms, they suggest that hydro, for example, has to grow tenfold from today until 2050. But we know that this is not happening in the ground because Brazil is actually investing more in gas because hydro is heavily vulnerable to climate change. Drought, of course, limits significantly the capacity of hydro to generate electricity. At the same time, we also see that solar and wind are increasing, will experience in Brazil at least a 40%, 40 times increase between now and 2050 to be 1.5 compatible. But we haven't yet mixed these results of what risk means for planning 1.5 compatible systems, and this is something that we want to do because we know that once you incorporate climate risk, the energy systems are going to look significantly different. And basically the message that I have here is that one cannot have a 1.5 compatible energy system unless you consider risk, unless you have modeled risk and put it into your numbers. What we foresee is that resilient and green systems are very likely moving away from vulnerable solutions such as hydro, in the case of Brazil or wherever drought is a big problem. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudio. Now we open the floor for questions. So please raise your hand, and there are micros in the room. Introduce briefly yourself and go straight to your question. If you want to comment, one-on-one conversations can be established afterwards, please.
Thank you. Ryan Beachy from CNC3 Television in Trinidad. Dr. Fletcher, I'd like to ask you, based on what you would have said, the African and Arab groups a couple days ago on Thursday called for the adaptation indicator to be delayed by a couple of years. Now, given that last year there was Hurricane Beryl at the start of the hurricane season in the Caribbean, and then at the tail end this year, there was Hurricane Melissa and floods, as you yourself mentioned, in between high winds. Can the Caribbean afford a delay in the adaptation indicator? Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. That is a very good question. And it's also, unfortunately, a very layered question. Well, the response is a very layered one. This topic of the GGA indicators is one that is currently occupying quite a bit of attention within the Alliance of Small Island States. There are countries that are very firm on wanting to see a resolution, and there are countries that have some apprehension over the fact that some of the GGA indicators have not been finalized. And I think that Caribbean countries and small island developing states have championed a global goal on adaptation, and that continues to be our position, but we really would like to see GGA indicators that are complete. I think that is really what is the issue right now. So it's not a straight yes or no answer. It's a kind of nuanced answer. And unfortunately, because we are still within our own group debating it so heavily, I'm not really at liberty to say much else on it. Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have more questions in the room? Okay, so yeah, I don't see. Thank you very much to everyone in the room. So we need to wrap up. Thank you very much to our guests. Thank you to REN21. By the way, ren21.net, you have all the information and the recent Intel brief on how renewables are essential for resilience, economic and social, and of course, energy resilience. So thank you very much. Bye.